Hey everyone, and welcome to the GRC Room for 5 questions. I'm Mike Andrews here once again with Karina Klever, and we're happy to welcome Akram Sheriff, who's the co-founder and CTO of a stealth startup with prior software engineering and AI roles at Hippocratic AI, Cisco, and other well-known companies. How are you doing today, Akram?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you doing?
We're doing well. So without further ado, let me pass it to Karina for a brief intro and the first question.
All right, thank you. So I'm Karina Klever of Klever Compliance. We do compliance management as a service, and right now we're battling Toolard a lot with companies. So I have the first question for you. What part of cyber GRC do you believe that businesses struggle with the most?
I think one of the hardest problems in GRC right now is not just writing any documentation as a policy, but how do we continuously enforce the trust across dynamic AI systems? Now, when I say AI systems, it could be deterministic AI systems like AI agents, or it could be autonomous AI agents. Traditionally, GRC used to assume human entities with static applications or microservices-based web applications and so on, which used to have a predictable workflow. But now that notion is actually getting broken down because of the autonomous agentic AI systems, because the assumption that agents can actually autonomously browse, make decisions, invoke tools at runtime, and take decisions gives them a lot more functional autonomy, and that actually exposes to a lot of issues at runtime. So traditionally, businesses used to have a static mapping of a microservice-based application to an accountable identity. That notion does not exist anymore. And that's where, from a governance risk compliance GRC perspective, it's becoming hard to maintain the runbooks or the normal static policies. And this is one of the challenges which many of the businesses are struggling the most at this point of time. So the gap is pretty much between how do we convert documented compliance into runtime GRC assurance with different kind of AI systems?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's hard, So we have AI governance, then you have things like parameters, and you have boundaries, and it's like, okay, those are part of AI governance, but that's not all of AI governance. We need policies, we need to review things over time. It is a big problem.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm going to add that I think, having a good GRC program in place, you have to take the same exact guidelines and apply it to your AI solution. So your data classification, your data mapping, your data structuring, your access controls, your API listings, right? And what level of data is allowed into which API, your vendor management, your due diligence. You have an AI platform, great. Where are you putting my data? So a lot of these governance protocols are just as important, I think, in AI. If we treat AI like it's just another vendor, we need to still have, now I'm not saying send a 7,000 questionnaire line item assessment to the guy who refills the coffee cups in the pantry room, right? I mean, there has to be appropriateness, and a good vendor management program really is sitting on top of data classification and says, based on the data that I'm sharing with you or you're handling for me, is my level of due diligence. And then, of course, contract management is part of that vendors. So what can you commit to when you have my data? A lot of people don't like to check that, but those are all very important things. Yes, and these are all huge struggles. Absolutely agree. Mike?
That's very interesting. So Akram, we've seen a lot of data breaches in the news, companies large, medium, and small. What's one data breach that stood out to you the most, and why that one?
Yeah, in fact, there are a couple of instances which comes to my mind. One important instance in the industry is the SolarWinds cyber attack as a data breach, because that fundamentally changed how the industry thinks and operates, and how CISOs and CIOs operate in enterprise. That particular data breach actually demonstrated that even trusted software updates can themselves expose as attack vectors, and they can actually manifest in different forms so that they can compromise the data assets and the software systems. And as a consequence, the security threat vector can propagate to multiple other interconnected systems. So traditional static perimeter-based security models or static firewall rules would actually fail in such scenarios, and that's where existing vendors had a hard time to address such kind of data breaches. Another instance which comes to my mind is something which happened today morning. GitHub had an instance where about 3,800 GitHub repositories were exposed due to a developer tooling related data exfiltration attack. Now, the threat vector here actually entered into the system via the traditional plugin-based developer tooling, and then it compromised some of the functionality on the VS Code IDE, and then actually it created the attack so that it can actually exfiltrate GitHub enterprise-based repositories. That is about 3,800 odd. And this is another scenario where code-related data breach is also happening. So the more with MCP servers, the more agentic AI systems and the new kind of AI protocols are emerging, I would say that there are a lot more instances of new kind of threat attack vectors which can actually enter into different systems and actually create data breaches. So we'll have to move at machine speed. That's my whole take. And the recent Anthropic's and Claude model and the Mythos model with the project Glasswing is leading the industry with the right stewardship, I would say. And we are all working together as a part of the coalition at this point of time. So looking forward to more exciting things happening to address such data breaches in the industry.
Oh, that would be great. That would be amazing. All right, so why don't you tell us about the most impactful GRC related advice that you have ever received?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was actually challenged by one of the VCs and ex-CISOs of a top banking organization who's right now an operator here in the Bay Area. And one important advice that he gave me a couple of years back is do not think about GRC and governance purely from a documentation perspective. Think about how you can operationalize and think about how you can operationalize with minimum costs but can provide maximum value. So I go with that Pareto kind of principle. What is the 20% of the thing that you can do and you can control from a GRC perspective that can provide 80% business value to the organization? So that's one impactful GRC related advice that I ever received. So continuous verification instead of doing periodic reviews is an important aspect of that particular advice as well. And then how we can actually have runtime policy enforcement at different layers of that stack so that it can provide complete end-to-end visibility from a governance, risk, and compliance, and can probably provide you some security threat scores in different components so that you get an overall holistic view of what's happening in different organizations or different business units within a broader enterprise organization. So that is one impactful GRC related advice I ever received.
And that really is very core to what GRC was supposed to always do. It was supposed to take these competency areas across your company. It was supposed to define what is it supposed to look like, hence your controls. Well, how is it supposed to operate? And if one of the controls fail, mitigate it. That's your risk item, right? And so all of these frameworks that come at us with these hundreds of controls, so many of them are just pure noise and completely unnecessary. When you have your actual procedures and your processes and your standards and your policies written to what you actually really do while adhering to the regulatory and framework requirements, you can actually watch your operations and know what's failing before, as it fails, or in advance of the auditor showing up and saying, hey, here's an observation, right? So it's very important to have GRC just be part of your regular operations, whether you automate systemically the collection of evidence or not. Of course, you know, if you can, please do. And a lot of times it's an AI solution, right? But having focus on that is very important.
Totally. Yeah, I agree with you. And part of the reasoning being how you can actually look into the data trace, which actually resulted in a particular decision-making approach on a particular given date. and how you can relook into your strategy from a GRC perspective, so that if the same instance happens in future timestamp, how would you take care of that particular approach? And that is where GRC systems have to evolve to combat this AI native or AI related security threats.
Correct.
Yeah. Well said. So for the next question, Akram, what is something that you do differently that's allowed you to excel in this field?
Yeah, I think a strong differentiator in modern cybersecurity and GRC could be that how you can treat security, identity, infrastructure, and behavior patterns as one end-to-end connected system rather than treating them as different isolated compliance domains. And when I say identity, within identity you have subcategories. You have human employee identity, you have non-human identity, NHI, and then you have these agents which are actually having a lot of identity with the autonomous AI systems. So how you can have all these entities not looked at from a data perspective in different siloed viewpoints, but rather how do you get an overall or an overarching view across all these different domains from a compliance perspective. That will help you accelerate the GRC to combat and to address the modern day AI security threats. So that's one thing I would do differently to excel in this field at this point of time, as opposed to how things were done 5 years, 10 years back.
That's so important. We can't be operating just based on compliance. What I look at before compliance is risk and usefulness, because the risk adds business context and usefulness, so people want to actually use processes and procedures rather than just having it in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah, procedures, that documentation, published documentation should never be written for the purpose of an auditor. They need to be written for the purpose of simplifying your workers' everyday job. So they know how to be successful. You're relying on people to come in from potentially other industries, other cultures, other jobs, and know inherently what to do and what's expected of them. You have to give them instructions. And that's what all of this is supposed to be. Last question of the day. So what would you say is the top thing that a business can do today to strengthen their cyber GRC program?
I think businesses have a lot more accountability and a lot more importance to take GRC seriously, because I have seen some organizations, they might be using NIST AI risk management framework, the RMF. But how RMF can be tailored according to the vertical in which that particular organization is operating. It could be enterprise, or it could be retail, or it could be healthcare, or it could be banking, fintech organization. I think that's where businesses will have to give a lot more importance to GRC. So they'll have to harden the GRC procedures, the scope of work, and what kind of framework are they adopting to execute the GRC within their organization. And some of the biggest emerging risks in autonomous AI-based systems with different kind of these co-pilots from the IDEs, the long-living API credentials, the shadow AI tooling, and the third-party agentic integrations, and some of these non-human machine-based identities are creating a lot more new kind of security threats, which traditional GRC documentation or GRC frameworks would have never seen. So I think organizations and business have a lot more things to be done at this point of time, and they will have to harden and strengthen their GRC compliance and what kind of tooling they're using on a day-to-day basis. That would be my big takeaway for any future organizations.
And I'm going to add, write an AI policy. Give your people direction on what they can do and what they can't do, because then if you don't, they think it's a free-for-all.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome insight, Akram and Karina. Thanks so much for joining us today, Akram. For anyone watching this, if you're not already following Akram, recommend doing so. And thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Karina. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.